couldn't wait to get back because we were on a roll last time, and Irena was just, she was dropping some knowledge. So let's get back to it really quick. Irena, you were talking about being the church.
Yeah.
And we're having to rehash what it means to be the church. Expound on that a little bit more as it relates to what you went through and also what you see happening with the pandemic and how it's shifted our church time.
Those are some big questions. And I can tell you a little bit about what I have been kind of digesting. So there's this, the idea really of being stripped down and the stripping away. So, in communism, a lot of those things that kind of create this Christian culture that you have in America. We did not have, we didn't have Christian schools, Christian universities, Christian bookstores. I remember first time I came to America, I was like, a whole bookstore of Christian things? What is this thing? Like Christian souvenirs and little knickknacks.
Yes.
Yeah, like book covers for the Bible. We're like, we just have the Bible, no covers. But all the things that create the Christian culture, we did not have that. But we had the community and the word and the community. But most importantly, we were held in God's hands.
Yes.
And so it was kind of like the bare minimums. And I keep going back to my husband, and he's just amazed when I tell him, like, we didn't have bananas every day. Bananas would come in, shipment, and then we'd get bananas. He's like, what do you mean you didn't have bananas every day? We're like, who eats bananas every day? It's fun. You just have them as a treat. So when you don't have it, you just think
you do.
It's a treat. Why would you have to have it every day and think that you are somehow lacking because you don't have it? So, we just lived and God provided. Like what you said, my dad couldn't get a promotion, but God kept and gave him a job. And so it was hard. My mom had a garden. We lived well. Yeah, we didn't have bananas, but we ate organic, fresh food from our garden.
Even
with the church, we had this community, and we had to really be intentional about how do we talk to other people about God. And it just came naturally. You worked with what you had within the boundaries that you have. And I'm a firm believer that boundaries are the best thing to inspire creativity.
Wow.
I'm so much more creative when I have a problem and just limited amount of resources than if somebody puts me in the middle of Michael's and says, be creative. Where do I start? But when you're in this old building and you've got these resources, create a Christmas wonderland, which we did with You for Christ, you are so creative. So we had limited resources, but we were so creative within them. And I'm just such a firm believer. And I think in America, there's just so much. You're always at like a big Christian Michael's, and all the creative, everything is there. It's like, what do you want to go to Christian school? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do this? So anyway,
so much.
Yeah. So, and it's not bad. Like I've enjoyed and benefited from it, but I'm just saying that this stripping down, which we kind of lived without being aware. Then what happened is, and I'm going to tie it all together. The war happened when we literally were stripped down. From our possessions. We had to leave our house. We lost all our possessions. We were refugees, sleeping on other people's floors. People were killed. People were, they lost their loved ones. We were blessed enough, we didn't lose anyone close to us, but we lost our house. We were refugees for 4 years, displaced in the other parts of things are taken away from you. Even those things that we had before, as far as church, everything was taken away. And then you have to come down to the essence. What does it mean to rely on God? What does it mean to be the church? Oh, it meant opening up your home to house the refugees. It meant sharing your food. I wore my friend's clothes to school because I didn't have she shared her clothes with me. It meant, like, what does it mean to be a believer? We all were together because you were stripped down. Those external things. It's like, what does it mean to be the church now in the war? What does it mean to be a family in the war? Is it elaborate vacations that make a family, or is it that we're all together and when we finally had our little apartment, we decided we're all going to sleep in the same room rather than in two separate rooms, just because we're family, we want to stick together. What does it mean to be family when you're stripped away, and what does it mean to be Christ, God's family? So when you were in the basement running away from the shelling and the mortar shells and grenades and everything, what do you have? You don't have you have you and God and prayers. Any of the external decorations or anything. Like, what is the church helping? And so that was another stripping away that happened. So when the pandemic hit, I wrote a little piece about the bare branches, which I have kind of started to have this love affair with bare branches. That's a whole other story. But I just love the bare branches when they come up when they're revealed and free in the fall, when all the fluttery, beautiful leaves and everything is gone. What do you see? You see the beauty of the tree and the branches, the structure that uphold it. That's what's left over. And it's like this intricate, beautiful lace of gnarliness. And the older they are, the gnarlier they get. And you see this beautiful structure. And so I wrote about how the pandemic really reminded me of the war. And we would hide in the basements, which were cold, and there was no internet and no TV, and we ate melba toast because that's something you could keep in the basement, for melba toast and plum jam was the thing for the and I wrote about how now it reminded me really being in the pandemic in the house, reminded me of being in the basement. But here I was in my comfortable home with all the food I wanted being delivered to me, cooking, comfortable with internet. And I was talking to my parents in Croatia and my sister over FaceTime, talking to them on our comfortable couches, laughing and kind of saying, this is so much better than the war. Wow. Yes, of course, I do not want to minimize the hardships of the pandemic. People who lost jobs, people who have lost lives. My mom just died. Two of my friends' parents died during the, people are losing lives. The isolation is real. The loss of jobs. There are so many horrible things. I'm not minimizing that. Please understand that. But all I'm saying is that this kind of a hardship, it, to me, seemed very childish compared to running and from mortar shells and all of that. But also reminded me of this when things were stripped away, things going and being with people and doing things and being busy and the support and the church, being able to go to a beautiful building and here, then you're like, well, what matters?
What matters?
What matters? What is the church? Is the church the building and our multiple meetings every week? Is that what makes up the church? Or is the church this community that can survive the barriers? And when these boundaries were implemented, then we had to be creative. And all of a sudden we're like, let's meet this way. It still didn't prevent my husband and I were like, well, we can still make brownies or food and drop it off in front of people's homes and go visit us, stand in their yard and drop off things for them. You become creative, and things were stripped away, but we had to redefine. We had to start redefining what church is. How do we do church? How do we connect with God? How do we connect with each other? And I think that was a good start for church in America to continue that journey, especially in view of all the political situation. To continue stripping away things that are not
essential.
Exactly. That old saying, that are not essential, and saying, what is the church? How can we be the church, regardless of the fact whether we're in a communist country, whether we're in the middle of a pandemic or this political situation or that political situation. Each one has its challenges.
Right.
How can we be the church? What does that mean? How do we rely on God? And Lindsay, you mentioned, how God will not give us more than we can handle. And I kept thinking, in view of my personal story, and I read somewhere, and it really spoke to me. It said, God will give us more than we can handle. Because then we will have to rely on him.
Mercy.
Right.
We'll have to rely on him. And one of my friends told me, Irena, your problem is that you're capable, which is like, because then you think you can handle your own problems.
Yes.
Right.
2018, when I came to a head and when I couldn't handle my problems.
Right.
Now I was forced to give it to God.
Yes.
I think it's the same thing with
that.
church. We can't out-program this problem. We can't out-organize it.
Wow.
And, we got to rely on God, and we got to go back to the bare branches.
Yes.
And say, how do we rely on God? How do we be a witness? Even if people think we are this or that, even if there's stereotypes, even if whatever government laws are in place or policies, good, bad, somebody thinks this is good, somebody thinks this is bad, whatever, how do I live out the policy that I know is God's policy? During communism, we had to make those choices because things were legal that were not in line with God's.
Right.
See, and I like the way that you talked about your dad and how when he was faced with, well, if you compromise, you can get this promotion. Your dad said, no, I know in whom and in what I believe, and I'm not going to compromise.
Yes.
And so even now with the stripping that's going on, with the pandemic or whatever that stripping might be in your life, I think that we all come down to that point where, are we going to choose God's side or are we going to do something else?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And the other thing I think is important to talk about. So talk about this a minute. So I did not remember that you were a refugee for 4 years. I'm taking notes fast and furiously, that you lost your house and everything and stuff like that. I mean, I knew you lived in wartime to where you were running from your house to the neighbor's house to get in their basement or whatever. I remember you telling that story, but I mean, this is something we run into the basement when a tornado is coming, but not people coming, although, who knows all that might but that we might need to be prepared for. But you're in the basement with other people. Let's just say, let's talk about the church. How does the church need to respond to each other during these times of, in our pandemic time? Being the church relationally looks like what, because that's kind of my thing. I'm like, you guys, we have an enemy. Don't let the enemies, don't treat your brothers and sisters as if they're the enemy. Remember who the enemy is. But so talk about some unity. The things, how important that is during times like that.
Yeah. When the war happened, it was amazing to how united the church got. Even like, we have few denominations in Croatia, nothing like America. When I came here, I was like hundreds of denominations and non-denominations or, independent churches. We had a few, of course, there's the Catholic Church and then a few like Baptists and Pentecostals and Brethren. I think that was it, and a few other ones. But all of a sudden, it didn't matter. We were all like, what is the task in front of us? What do we need to do? Where is the need? Things that we couldn't have even imagined to do before. All of a sudden, the churches became the centers for humanitarian aid. We even lived in a church apartment for a while because the church didn't have a pastor, so they offered it to us. And my mom would come to people constantly came for help. And when she'd answer the door, they would think she was a nun because they were just used to Catholic, you know. So I'd come out and they're like, "Where's the nun?" I was like, "I think my mom." So, but all of a sudden that didn't matter, you know.
Right.
They're like,
Right.
it didn't matter if she was what church, and people just started coming together, being creative in how we can connect and how we can help those people in need, regardless of
Right.
who they are, what religion, what faith, what ethnicity, because our war was about ethnicity. And so sometimes it's a little hard for Americans to understand because we're all look the same. So they're like, "What do you mean?" But they're all like white. But I was like, "But yeah, but they're Serbs who are Orthodox and Croatians who are Catholic." And so
everybody has a different look.
Yeah, so it's different. And so it's like religious and ethnicity. But one thing that I wanted to say, I don't know that this directly answers your question, but going back to my dad and my parents, you know, my parents were not the pastors. Like my mom was actually really, she speaks and she's a great writer and speaker, and she was always involved in women's ministry and leading, and she's a little bit more kind of outspoken. My dad is like the quiet, supportive type. So my dad was not like the Tim Keller of Croatia, you know, who was like, "Let me tell you and speak the truth." He was just a quiet guy who worked hard to support his family, but he stood by his beliefs. And without lots of pomp and circumstance, he said, "I'm not going to become a member of the Communist Party. I'm going to do what is right." My mom taught us at home. There was no like, "Oh, I'm going to do homeschooling. I'm going to do this or that." My mom was just like, "I teach my children God's word." You know, it seemed so naturally. They were just, and so I think that's my challenge also to the American church, kind of the answer to it is that just each one of us, we don't have to be influencers or big famous people or the leaders of the church to be leaders, to take a stand, to be the church, to live out the values of the heavenly kingdom. And so we talked about how I became an American citizen, and for years I struggled with what it means, and I still continue to, but what it means to be a Croatian and then be American, losing my identity, and how can I be a Croatian here, and this, and you know, it was a long journey, but what it came down to, I thought, what does it mean to be Croatian for me? It means to live like my parents, to live out those values. I want to make that food. I want to take it to my neighbors like my parents did. I want to be hospitable like my parents did. And I thought, as long as I live the values of my parents, I will be Croatian in America. And then I thought, maybe that's the same thing with Heavenly Kingdom. As long as I live the values of my Father, I'm a citizen of the Heavenly Kingdom, and I can be a citizen here of the Heavenly Kingdom, regardless of what my earthly citizenship here in America says. This is how you live. I gotta live the values of my Father. That's how I remain the citizen of the kingdom. So I just keep thinking back to my parents and their example, and I think that would be my encouragement to people here. It's like each person can just do what's right in front of them. See where the need is, how they can connect, how they can be creative in the middle of the pandemic or this or that political situation. Recognize what the values of our Father are. And I know that, I mean, those are just kind of phrases that we need to kind of get into the weeds of it and make it practical. But what are the values of my Father? Not what are the values of this political party, that political party? What are the values of this system or that system? What are the values of my Father? How do I live that out? And then we can all quietly live it out. And quietly sometimes I tell my friend often when we talk about her raising her kids, and I was like, I love you do like the slow and steady game, slow and steady. And that's with my parents. I keep going back again and again to my parents, to their quiet way of faithful tending their garden, sharing their crops, feeding us well, teaching us God's word, staying true to their values, standing up for them, not making they never made us feel like it was such a big tragedy that we had to rush from school straight on Christmas Eve, straight to church. They're like, that's just how life is. You have to go to school on Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
Just make sure you get to church quickly at 7 so we can do the Christmas play.
Yeah.
It was not a big tragedy.
Right. Oh, I just love it. Go
That is a
ahead.
great place to transition.
Yes. So guys, yeah, and let me
No,
say,
I think we're going to start calling you Pastor Jansen. But I think it's a great place to transition. And then this next segment, we're going to go into
The middle.
some significant middles for you.
Yeah.
Significant middles. So we'll see you this next time. Come back because Pastor Jansen here, as we bring
Yes.
has some wonderful nuggets to drop on us. So
Yes, and again, for those of you who didn't see the first one, this is Lindsay Pollard over there. I'm Joy Martin, and we have been talking. Such a great talk with Irena Jansen. So come back. There's more to the middle. All right, see you next time.